Welcome back to Boilers in the Stands. I am your host, Joe Jackson. Alongside me, as always, is my co-host, Craig Bowers. We are here to preview Purdue versus Washington. It is a Wednesday night tip, a late tip for most, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time. It is on Big Ten Network. That's Wednesday, January 15th. For me, give me 9:30 tips over like noon tips. I know I'm in the strong minority there, but like the early games, it's tough, but the late games, I can do those. So we will be live for sure after the game, and we'll go into probably the morning, I assume, after. If you want to make sure that you're there for that, or if you want to catch it afterwards, it'll still be up on YouTube. Make sure to like, subscribe, turn on bell notifications. You'll get notified when these go live. When our post games go live, obviously you can watch them. You don't have to watch them live, especially like a game like this where it is a 9:30 tip. It is a late 9:30 Eastern time tip, a late one for Purdue. Craig, I'll throw it to you. Just kind of your general thoughts on Washington, and also like we don't have to go deep into this, but any concern of it being a super late tip?
I mean, not too much. That's one of the things I was going to say just in general is it's just going to be interesting to see how all these teams handle the West Coast trips. So far, I think most of the Big Ten teams that have gone west have handled it better than what people probably expected coming into the year. As you've seen some teams go out there and sweep their trip. You've seen some teams go out there and get upsets that they certainly weren't favored in. So, it's just going to be interesting. I know I believe they're leaving tomorrow, so I think they are going out a little bit early to try to get adjusted to it. I had heard some conversation that a lot of the Big Ten coaches kind of were talking to NBA teams about how they handle it, like midweek trips, traveling across the country and that sort of stuff. So I believe that's the case. But a Washington team that obviously is not in the upper tier of the Big Ten. They're 10-7 on the year, 1-5 in the Big Ten coming into this game. They're only 1-5 in quad one games as well. That quad one game win came against a Big Ten team in Maryland. They have shown some fight in some games. In some other games, they've gotten absolutely boat raced. When they came for their Midwest trip against Michigan State and Michigan, they showed a little bit of fight in that Michigan game and the Michigan State game. It was over from the beginning pretty much, if I remember right. So a team that has some fight, but not a top tier team by any means. They're currently ranked 93rd in KenPom, 113th or 137th on KenPom offense and 75th in KenPom defense. Team that's going to want to kind of slow it down. They're only 117th in the country in tempo. At least in that Michigan game that I got to watch kind of the full game of, it seemed that they were purposely trying to control the tempo and kind of control the pace in that game specifically. And then obviously, just in general, this team doesn't shoot the ball well. They don't shoot the ball well from three. They don't score a lot from three. Their percentages are really low. Only two guys on this team that are really shooting a halfway decent percentage outside. They're going to look to get into the paint a lot, and that all starts and ends kind of with great Osabar. So if we want to go ahead and dive into the players, or do you have some more things? Let's talk in general real quick. Just from an offensive standpoint, what do you expect to see this team do from a scheme standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it starts with not a lot. Most of it starts with Great Ospor, and Purdue fans might remember him. He was on the Utah State team last year that Purdue beat in the round of 32. In that game, he had 14 points, 6 rebounds, 2 steals. He is an undersized big that has really good body control and just really good physicality. He's 6'8", 250, really good touch, good hands, can facilitate. He's a guy that they'll kind of let work from the top of the key, where they'll get into some handoff action, some zoom actions, or just kind of let him keep and go. You'll see him a lot also screen and roll, where then the roll kind of like similar to what Purdue did with Edey at times, where the roll essentially starts the post up and he rolls, seals the guy, and then that starts his post up. A lot of one-on-one touches for Ospor in the post where they just kind of let him work. Aside from that, though, like they do run, the offense hasn't been good. I do like some of the stuff that they run. They run good, pretty off-ball movements, pin downs, and things of that nature. Everything starts with Ospor, but like when that doesn't happen, they do have some good things in terms of just some pick and roll play with Diallo. We'll get into the player specifically in a second. Diallo, DJ Davis didn't play last game. I don't know if he will, but if he is in, he's somebody that they'll just kind of run corner to corner and just basically try to get him some open looks. He almost beat Illinois single-handedly. He had 7 threes in that game. So they have some dudes, but a lot of what they want to do is drive. They want to get downhill. They want to feature Asabor in pretty much everywhere on the floor. He's not a shooter, but he's a really good facilitator. Zoom Diallo, we'll talk about him in a sec. He's the one guy I think that really worries me off the bounce. And then defensively, they're a team that there's two sides to the statement I'm going to make. They are a team that can do a bit of everything defensively. Part of that, the one side of that is that I think they have some versatility in what they can bring. The other side is they haven't found anything that specifically works game to game. And so there's some times where they're going to be in high hedge. Other players are going to be in drop coverage. Sometimes they'll throw out a 1-3-1 zone. Sometimes they'll press a little. Sometimes I think if I was to say what they like, if it was Danny Sprinkle's ideal world, I think that their defense would be closer to the UConn system of last year, of just like not helping a lot, making it one-on-one, making it 2-on-2 games. You'll see sometimes, like, I'm getting kind of ahead of myself, but screening will be important. If you don't screen well, they just kind of don't do anything with their big and just trust their guards. So we'll dive into a little bit more of the specifics throughout, but I would say that's just overall what they are, is kind of what they've done this year.
And offensively, I guess just in watching the games that I have watched, I think one thing they do a nice job of is running a bunch of different type of action just to get a mismatch for Osabar, where they'll do some handoffs and they'll do some screening, and the whole thing is really just aimed at trying to get the mismatch that they want, and then they'll feed him and let him go to work. But he'll attack bigs too. In that Michigan game, he got Wolf and
Golden.
Who's the other big? Golden. Jesus. They got Wolf and Golden both. He kind of got them both into foul trouble. He hasn't played great in Big Ten play. That was really his first game that he played better. But he has the ability to do that, right? So in terms of getting to the free throw line, he averages about 7 attempts a game. He doesn't shoot it well once he's there, only 57% on the year. But nonetheless, he will draw some fouls. So that's something I think Purdue will have to pay attention to. Let's just jump into some of the players, and then we can kind of come back around to some of the matchups. So talking about the guard and wing room first, we've got Tyree Hinacho averaging 4.5 points a game, 3 rebounds a game, 2.1 assists. Looks like he kind of leads the offense primarily. Guy that can't shoot from 3 necessarily. Zoom Diallo, who you mentioned, a really athletic guard that's got some size at 6'4", averaging 10.9 points a game, 2.8 assists a game. And then Tyler Harris on the wing at 6'8", sophomore that's averaging 12 points a game, 5.3 rebounds a game. That's a transfer from Portland. Should say that Diallo is a freshman that was ranked number 43 in the country. Harris is the one guy that kind of jumps out in the guard and wing room that is shooting, around 45 just a little bit under 45% for 3 on the year.
Yeah, so I'll start with Zoom Diallo because he's been one of my favorite freshmen to watch. I think the top 4 all Big Ten freshman spots are kind of on lock of Harper, Bailey, Queen, and Yakuchonis. But that 5th spot's going to be kind of wide open for a few different guys. I think Diallo is definitely in that mix of guys that could be on that 5th spot. Just a crazy athletic guard that can get downhill, has good size. Like, his biggest flaw right now is he doesn't have a three ball to him at all. He's only 3 of 14 from 3 on the year, but he is shooting well from mid range. He's 42% on 33 attempts on non-paint 2s. He's shooting like 41% kind of on floaters. He's shooting 65% at the rim. So there'll be times that they just kind of ISO for him, or they just run a simple high ball screen and let him go to work and get downhill. Matchup wise, they have some size, especially in that starting unit. And so it'll be interesting to see what they do. Tyree Hinacho, he's kind of started as the point guard, but I think Diallo has more or less taken that from him. I think his thing right now is he is a very good defender, and that's the biggest thing he brings. Another guy that can he's really, really fast with the ball, like very fast with the ball. So he can get downhill, and he uses that to try to get to the rim a bunch. I don't think he even has too much of a mid-range shot, but he is going to be somebody that can get downhill and put some pressure on the defenses that way. And then Tyler Harris is the only dude that's like a 3-level scorer, I think, on this team. 6'8". He's listed at 190, but he was listed at 190 last year at Portland, and I watched the film. I think he's bulked up some since then, but still on the skinnier side, on the leaner side. but he's been playing pretty well. He is shooting the ball great. He can be a guy that can use his size sometimes to get downhill and get to the rim. He is not a passer at all. Like, he is not a passer whatsoever. He has 4 assists on the year, and he's played basically like 25 plus minutes every single game. The dude's going to score. He is going to, if he has the ball in his hands, he's going to try to score. Good athleticism with him too at 6'8".
Yeah. And then just transitioning kind of to the bigs here, Wilhelm Bredenbach, who people may remember from Nebraska for a couple of years ago. Not averaging a lot, only 4.9 points on the year, but he is shooting 41% from 3 on about an attempt and a half a game. So with Great Osipar maybe being more of the post-up option, he may be more of a little bit of an outside big from that standpoint. And then obviously we've already talked about Great quite a bit, but 14.3 points a game, 8.6 rebounds a game, 3.4 assists a game, 6.9 free throw attempts per game, 2.2 steals as a big man. Just does a little bit of everything for this team, and obviously is the major focal point. Wants to get to his left as much as he can. He is averaging 3.4 turnovers a game, so he will turn the ball over some, and I think there's going to be some opportunity for some guards and wings to dig down on him and try to get their hand on the ball a little bit. But I'll just turn it over to you, whichever one you want to start with there.
I'll start with Bredenbach because I think it'll be a little bit quicker. He is not a high usage player at all. There are games where he doesn't really play that much at all, just kind of dependent on what they want to do matchup wise. They can go very small. They have all sorts of sizes that Washington can go. They could go ultra small, where they play a 4-guard lineup of everybody 6'4" and less, and then Osibor, who's 6'8". They can play the medium lineup where like Tyler Harris slides to the 4, or they can play a little bit bigger with Wilhelm Bredenbach as kind of the counter big to Great Osibor. Casey Beckway can also slide in there, and we'll talk about him in a sec. But stretch big, not super high usage, has been really efficient. Nobody's going to run the offense through him. He's okay defender at best. I think he's somebody that Purdue can try to go at and attack, and I think ultimately I would expect him to kind of get played off the floor in this game. Now that I said that, of course, he's going to knock down like 5 threes or something. But Great Osibor, he's obviously the biggest draw and biggest star of this team. For anybody that follows the off-season rumors, he's supposedly got paid a whole lot of money to go to Washington this year. And it's been a little bit rocky. He's had some no-shows. He didn't make a field goal against Michigan State. Put up 23, 11, and 4, though, against Michigan. You hit it, right? He wants to get to the left hand a lot. We already talked about it at the top. He is somebody that they'll run where he's kind of works in the handoff game. He can be a pick and roll guy. He can just kind of be a guy that they say, hey, here's the ball at the elbow, just go to work, and he'll face up and drive. He can get to the post. He's not athletic, and he's not a good jumper, but he is at 6'8", 250, can use his size to try to create some of the space and get some of the post-ups that way. Good passer. He does force some, and especially on this team, I think it's really exemplified how much he's tasked with in terms of just some of the decisions that he has to make are tough, and he doesn't make the right ones, or it's just bad passes, things like that. But yeah, like I said, he's not an above the rim player whatsoever, but he is very skilled, good footwork, and good, size to be able to move players. He has also just insanely quick hands defensively. Like, he's not really a rim protector. His rim protection comes from just kind of like stripping guys on drives and things like that. So somebody like TKR, at some point, I assume they'll be matched up against each other. TKR at times has had issues, containing the ball and keeping control. That will be one of the keys, I think, within this, is if TKR is on Osibor, just not letting him get ripped.
Yeah. And I think it's going to be really interesting just to see what Purdue dials up defensively. But I feel like we keep talking. It just feels like we keep playing these teams that have like a primary scorer or a primary duo, and then everybody else is in a very small role. It's going to be interesting to see what Purdue does when, I was watching Washington play Michigan. That's the main game that I watched to get ready for this. And just watching that, I was like, okay, wonder what Purdue's going to do when we play a team where all 5 guys on the court can go for 15 at any point in time, But
yeah,
that's a story for another show. So if we get to the backup, if we get to the backup guards and wings here, Makai Mason, 8.1 points, 2.1 rebounds, 1.2 assists. shoots a little bit more from outside from a 3-point percentage. It's not, or our 3-point attempts and total percentage isn't great, but a bigger guard at 6'5" is averaging, where was it? He's averaging 1 steal a game. So you mentioned Iheanacho averaging a steal a game. So is he. A couple of guys that can do things defensively in terms of creating turnovers. We don't know if DJ Davis is going to play yet or not. If he does, it changes things quite a bit. Like you said, he scored 31 points against Illinois. Hadn't been doing that all year necessarily, but he is averaging 8.7 points a game and shooting about 33% from three as well. And then lastly, Lewis Cartwright averaging 5.5 points per game and 2.1 rebounds, 1.8 assists. To me, a guy that just jumped off the page is kind of being tough, just kind of being a built tough guard out there. I'll let you kind of run where you want to in terms of highlighting these three.
Yeah, Makai Mason, I thought he was going to be a little bit better than what he was this year. He's still a good defender. He's not quite shooting the clip at what he was the last 2 years, but he is a very capable shooter. And on a Washington team where they don't have many options, he's second or he's probably the third best shooter, at least on some sort of volume. Lanky can be a little bit disruptive defensively, not going to run a ton of stuff for him, but still need to know where he's at. DJ Davis, if he does play, he's the one guy they're just going to run stuff for DJ Davis to get open looks from three. He isn't shooting great this year. He is a better shooter than what the percentage shows. He is he's out there to shoot the ball, and that's what he does, and that's what he's going to bring if he is out there. Obviously, ankle injury, we don't know at time of recording whether he'll play or not. And then Lewis Cartwright is just a little bit of he's almost like an undersized forward with how he plays. He's only 6'3", 200 listed at. Not a shooter at all. Physical driver, can draw some fouls, can also help run. Like, he was recruited as a point guard, and at times he plays almost power forward for them. It's just if there's a lineup where he's in and gets like Braden on him, he's probably going to try to post him up a bunch, would be my guess, or even CJ, even Lawyer, to be honest, honestly, any of them. He'll be somebody that can kind of post them up and go to a little bit of booty ball. So I think those were the three. I think the only other two really worth mentioning, Christian King has been getting spots minutes. He's a redshirt forward. He's somebody that if he's on the floor, have to be worried about from three. He's not limited volume, but has knocked a few down this year. And then Casey Beckway, he's not high usage whatsoever if he's on the floor, but he is a big human, 6'10", nearly 300 pounds. Pretty good rebounder. Obviously, some just naturally good rim protection. And so that's kind of what those two bring if they get minutes, but the other three are the main bench guys.
So if we think about then and kind of turn the page to how we expect Purdue to attack this team and how we expect Purdue to defend this team, I'm going to start on the defensive side of the ball because I think that one's a little bit more interesting. But I would expect Purdue, as I was watching Washington, the one thing that maybe worried me just a little bit is it felt like they had a lot of different guards that were pretty good off the bounce and that could attack relatively decently. They've got a little bit of length and size in their guards and wings that can still attack off of the bounce. And then I remembered that nobody can shoot from three basically on this team other than one guy. And unless DJ Davis just gets really hot again like he did at Illinois. And then you think about great and what Purdue likes to do there. Purdue's going to send help. They're going to try to keep him from getting to his left. They're going to send help, and they're just going to dare Washington to hit anything from three would be my guess. But you're the X's and O's guy, so...
Yeah, they're going to run their normal post defense where they force baseline and have a bunch of help there ready. They did it to him last year too in the NCAA tournament game. Had good success, forced him into some honestly just bad shots that he took, and he's susceptible to taking those at times. But that's going to be priority number one. And then like you said, they do have dudes that can take guys off the bounce and get downhill a bit. So I would expect to see just normal defense where, like you said, they're going to want to force Washington to try to take threes. That's Purdue's natural kind of defense anyways. Washington's a team, though, that doesn't take many threes. So it'll be interesting to see which one kind of wins out there. Going to be an important game for kind of point of attack defense, especially on Zoom Diallo. Like I would guess CJ starts on Zoom and then Braden's on Iheanacho and then Lawyer's on Harris. But like I said, Washington is a team that Bradenbach could play 2 minutes and then they bring in another guard. And then so that shifts things around a lot. I also kind of thinking through it, if they're starting Bradenbach, I kind of expect first almost to start on him and then TKR to start on Osobor. I think it. I'm not like confident in it, but in my head, it makes sense of let first be the like guy you force Osobor into when he's posting up instead of forcing him into TKR. Osobor isn't gonna like blind you with his speed or anything, so I think TKR can hold up. We'll see though. It might just be first. Either way is good. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts. Try getting some gaps. Try to make him a 3-point shooting team.
Yeah, and that's really interesting to me in terms of how you talk about defending great there in terms of because in my head it was just going to be Caleb on him off the jump, but the way you explain that makes sense to me. I do worry a little bit, like we said, Osabar can draw fouls. We've
Yeah,
seen him do that. I worry a little bit about that matchup if TKs are on him of just getting him into foul trouble, and then things get a little bit more difficult for Purdue. We've seen him make it through it without him on the bench for extended minutes now in at least one game, but on the road on the other side of the country, I don't know that you want him in foul trouble early on. So it'll be interesting to see how they go about that just in general. It's a little bit different game also to me. Like I feel like most of these games we've talked about how much of a luxury it is to have Caleb out there because he's got to play against some kind of big athletic wings that aren't necessarily bully ball guys.
yeah.
And Osabar wants to bully ball. And I think Caleb, I needed to shut my Outlook off. I think Caleb has excelled in those matchups against those kind of, more athletic bigs that will go outside a little bit more. Relative to how he does in general against guys who really want to just bully you down low. So I'm interested to see how he holds up if he's on him or if TKR is on him, if he can play good defense without fouling either way. From an offensive standpoint here, I is not sure that it's kind of like the Nebraska game to me a little bit. Like I feel like they can just kind of go into their full bag against this team. There's nothing that I just look at and I'm super worried of like, oh, Washington's going to shut that down.
Yeah, I think the one thing Washington's done well defensively is they have done a good job limiting threes. And
Yeah.
some of it obviously plays into like a little bit of who they played. They didn't have a super tough non-conference, but at the same time, they're 20th in defensive 3-point percentage, and probably more importantly than that, they're 39th in defensive 3-point attempt rate, aka they don't let teams shoot a lot of threes. And so they, in an ideal world, would like this is where I'm going to come back to the screening. If there is no contact made on the screen, they are fine. Just basically where the big, so like Osobor, say Osobor is guarding TKR, for example. Osobor will just kind of jam into the TKR and push him up a little bit and allow the guard defender to basically get through. And so Osobor is not in drop, he's not in hedge, he's just staying with TKR. And so then that takes away a lot of the roll possibilities. It also means you don't have to provide as much help. So if they do that, and there's no guarantee they will, because like we said, I mean, they ran a 1-3-1 zone for like 20 minutes against Michigan. They will switch things up defensively, but if they're in that, that's where it's on Braden to just kind of be able to go create, take his dude off the bounce. They will high hedge at times. We know the short roll is going to be there. This is a game where if the 3-point looks aren't coming, and I think they won't be, especially compared to Nebraska, Braden TKR obviously just have to be good. Because like I feel like we haven't gotten as much of this lately, and for good reason, because the short roll's been there and all that. I don't think we've had big like TKR post up games, and I think this could be one of those where, from what I've seen, and like I said, I'm going to keep iterating. Washington does a lot of random stuff defensively, so they could start doubling, but I haven't really seen them double too much the post. And if they're going to stay one on one, like they stay one on one. They're also a team that doesn't provide a ton of help on the post in general. I don't hate just kind of dumping it down to TKR at times and letting him go to work, especially
Well,
if when Washington plays small. Washington can play 4 guards. If you can get the switch, dump it to TKR and just let him go.
yeah, I like that, especially coming off of one of his most efficient games of the year. Although most of those points were in that short roll with the little
Yeah,
floater, with as high as the percentage that he's been shooting that right now, I almost don't want to take that away from him. But
fair.
It'll be interesting to me because sometimes I think when Trey goes up kind of against a bigger, stockier center that's real big bodied like Osabar is, sometimes I think he struggles just a little bit more in trying to get that move, because he'll kind of hit, bang, to try to
Yeah.
create that back down a little bit. And if a guy just stops him when he tries to do that, then sometimes it's gotten a little bit more difficult for him. So whether it's that little floater in the short roll or the post, obviously expect to see a heck of a lot of touches go to TKR in this game too. I did notice that both of those 3-point percentage stats and defense as well. And watching that Michigan game, and I did watch some of the Illinois game too. I know it's like we've played enough games now, this shouldn't matter, but their non-conference schedule was terrible. It felt like Washington and Illinois got some good looks and just weren't hitting them in those 2 games. So, like, I believe that they're good in terms of 3-point defense. I don't know if I believe that they're as good as what the stats say, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think that's fair. On the flip side of that, though, they are a team that allows a lot of shots at the rim. So, like,
Yeah.
that's kind of where it's, if you can get downhill, because then if Brain can get downhill, he might just force them to have to rotate, and then you get threes. But offense, I think like my key for offense is just like be prepared and just be ready in terms of like they could go 1-3-1 one possession, the next possession they might press, and the next possession might be man. Like just kind of be dialed in and be able to run their stuff. Because if they do, I don't think Washington can stop them too much, other than if just Purdue happens to miss a bunch of shots.
Yeah. And, in that case where somebody's switching up the defense often, it's nice that we know we have one of the most intelligent and best point guards in the country that's just going to kind of survey things. And sometimes he'll just stand there and point. You go here, you go there. I'm going to do this, and then let's roll, So to me, I think, traveling across to the West Coast, even if maybe they don't get up as many threes from a volume standpoint as they might in some games, I think it's obviously just important that shooting travels, which we all know.
Yep.
I don't think this Washington team is a great rebounding team. So to me, this is one where we just won a rebounding battle. In the last game, to me, this is another game where Purdue should walk away with a rebounding advantage.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't know if I have too much more. The only other thing I really want to just like, I guess I kind of already just made this point, but it's like Purdue can't overlook this game. You come off a gigantic win, and you're staring down the next game, and 3 days after is a road game at Oregon, which Oregon's anywhere from a top 3 to 7 team in the Big Ten, depending on where you have them. Obviously, that is the bigger matchup. I almost wish these games were switched and that Purdue did have Oregon first, but this Washington has shown on any given night they can randomly just put it all together for 40 minutes. They did it against Maryland. They almost did it against Illinois. On the flip side, they've also shown they can be a train wreck for 40 minutes. Purdue just has to come in and just set the tone right away. I think I know they're not overlooking this game, but it's just natural human, right? To like, okay, Oregon's the bigger one. Still gotta walk out of here with a win, because I don't know if it was when we did the post game show for Auburn or Toledo or somewhere in that area, right, where sky was falling, it seemed like, for Purdue and all that. Kind of was just like, okay, first 5 games of the Big Ten, all very winnable. At minimum, you need to go 4-1. They've already accomplished that, going 4-0. But getting 5-0 in this stretch to just kind of set up the rest of their Big Ten play is going to be important.
Very important. And, I put something out on the socials today about remembering and over the summer and like early fall, like a whole bunch of people were talking about like, oh, a 13-7 team might win the Big Ten this year, right? And now we're sitting with 2 teams at 5-0 and Purdue at 5-1. So it doesn't look that way. It certainly could still end up that way, but it's probably not super likely.
Probably like 5-ish, 4 to 5.
Yeah, probably like 5-ish. So Purdue needs to take business, especially during this stretch. Oregon's probably the biggest game in that stretch that we talked about between January and February. So it'd be really nice to pick that one off on the road if possible. I saw you put out some stuff about Oregon's just somehow survived a bunch of games that they shouldn't have won this year. So it'll be interesting to see how Purdue matches up against them as well. But you mentioned Washington, like inconsistency. For some teams, like we've talked about a lot with Nebraska, how good they are at home versus how good they are on the road. hasn't seemed to really matter with Washington, where they got blown out by USC at home. They got blown out by Michigan State on the road. They get upset by Seattle at home. So like, I guess as we talk about inconsistency, sometimes people think, well, maybe they're a really good home team, not good away. Hasn't really mattered one way or another. It just, you never know which Washington's going to show up.
Yep. And I like Danny Sprinkle. I like what he's doing. I think long term he'll be good, but this is year one of the program for Washington under Danny Sprinkle, and it is showing. So yeah, do you have anything else for this preview?
I do not. What station is it on? Did we already mention that?
Yeah, it is. So it is Wednesday, January 15th. It is a 9:30 p.m. Eastern time tip on the Big Ten Network. So you can catch it there, and then you can catch us live right after, or if you're going to be asleep, the day after, and we will recap everything you need to know. Make sure to like, subscribe, turn on bell notifications so that way you get notified as soon as we do go live. Appreciate everybody tuning in, and then we will see you Wednesday, 11:30, 11:45-ish Eastern time.